Hi, everyone. This is James Giglio, CEO of MVP Interactive, and welcome to the MVP Podcast. Our podcast will bring insight to a range of topics involving technology, consumer engagement, experiential marketing, and general business-related subjects. This show will host not only our great roster of clients from the professional sports world, along with Fortune 500 brands and agencies, but other entrepreneurs and startups. We hope our podcast brings value, and thank you for listening. For general inquiries or topic requests, please email mvppodcast@mvp-interactive.com, and please subscribe to our YouTube page and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and SoundCloud with account name MVP Interactive. You had mentioned something really interesting in terms of having your hands across the entire organization and being able to do these things across departments. And, I don't think that there's anything more entrepreneurial than that, right? As a small business ourselves and entrepreneurs that we, you really take on a level of effort that, far exceeds an expectation maybe when you start, right? And just knowing and making sure that whether you had the previous experience or any level of domain expertise goes thrown out the window and you really learn it firsthand. And so how much of that experience do you think really gave you the education and the comfort to explore, another major league organization like the Blue Jackets, or, what the crossover there was?
Well, I think it was a couple fold. The first thing is you don't know what you don't know until you get into the middle of it, and so ignorance is bliss. And when you do get in there, sometimes too, it's so encompassing, and I felt, and again, I have a little bit of scale or a sense of what we were doing, and we were not curing cancer, we were not, world peace, causing world peace. But I did feel every day that I was the engine and the inertia, and I was the one. If I didn't show up, if I didn't bring the energy, no one else would. And I felt that onus. And I think that was something that, again, being at a place like Northwestern, an institution that's been around for 150 years, and no one wants to get hit by a bus, but the proverbial bus, and the world still goes on. And I don't know if I felt that way if Major League Lacrosse, and if I didn't make it a priority for my team with someone else, and this didn't speak to my team. I had a great team around me, and I'm thinking of the front office, not the players. The players are great too, but
sure.
but you really had to set the agenda, and you had to be clear, because wasn't going to come from someone else. We had great ownership, but they were hands off. And we had good support from the league, but again, they were in Boston, so here we were in Central Ohio, and we had the freedom to take some risks, and if we messed up, it was okay, but it was also that much more rewarding when we took the risk, and we were able to achieve what we were able to achieve. And I think that's also what made the ending so much difficult, because were we again completely, selling out tens of thousands of tickets all season and billions of dollars in revenue? No, we weren't there, but we were on the right path, and we were making gains every single day. And I was very proud of the team and what we had accomplished to date. So when it did kind of go away, it was a punch in the gut a little bit. And, I think that it did take a little bit of time to reevaluate. Did I still want to be in sports, and what level of sport, and what I wanted? And truthfully, when I sat down with the Blue Jackets, I was pretty candid on what I wanted and what I didn't want. And, I was okay coming into this role, not necessarily being quote unquote the person in charge. And I was okay maybe taking some orders, because I'd had that opportunity there.
Right.
Maybe at some point I'll get back to really wanting that, but that was something that I wanted, and being part of a larger team that had some of that inertia, that was really appealing at the time.
Yeah. That's really interesting too, because I think that's a level of self-awareness that, even on the entrepreneurial level, that this whether it's social media driven or just a trend in our culture right now, that entrepreneurialism is the only way to a career. And I don't think that there's anything further from the truth to that, where it certainly does take a special type of person and a level of endurance to be able to sustain the ups and downs and the responsibilities. And you're exactly right, the buck stops with you, and you have to bring it every single day. And so after going through that, you develop a callus or potentially even some level of PTSD. So to be able to kind of go into an opportunity and really identify, hey, I'd lived that life, I've taken on those roles, and that was tremendously empowering. But as your career progresses and you get into a more of a stable organization, you can really sort of level out, what you really want to work on and do, and sort of find a new trajectory for you. So I think that's a high level of self-awareness that people.
I think too, and I say this sometimes too, it's what kind of headaches do you want to deal with? Because we're all going to have headaches no matter where you are. And as long as the headaches don't become barriers to your success or blinding to what you're into thing. And I think that's a key piece, whether you're in an individual or at a large organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So here we are. We're at CBJ in your career here, and
yes,
you didn't realize it was just 2019 that you had started there, which is pretty fascinating as well, because as an organization, it's a 20 to 25-year-old organization, right? And
yep.
So it's fairly nascent to the other teams throughout the league, and so, but what stood out within the community to me, working firsthand with the organization, spending a good part of the summer in Columbus, is the community connection that the team has to the greater Columbus area and all of Ohio, really. And so, talk to us a little bit about the organization and how you've been able to, whether the performance on the ice has been successful or not, but how you have been able to really get a stronghold on the community, and not only the community, but even the league, right? I understand that CBJ is really a North Star to many clubs throughout the league to kind of take a peek in at what you're doing on fan experience, what you're doing from a marketing perspective, or maybe even operationally.
Yeah, first of all, you hit it right on the head. It's an young organization for the league. We're the 2001 was the first season, so we're not quite to our 25 right now, and that's a little bit unique too, because we're in an organization now where some of my colleagues are people that have been here before we even played our first game, so they have a huge amount of experience of seeing this from nothing to what it is today. And I think that's one of the interesting things. And you talk about the tie-ons to the community, that's a huge part of the Blue Jackets. When it came, obviously we're in Columbus, Ohio State athletics, specifically Ohio State football, a national and local power. But before that time, the crew had been here. There have been some other, again, tertiary sports, if you will, on the professional level, but not one at the Big Four level. And when we came in, and when the team came in, it was a real feather in the cap for the city to have one of the Big Four leagues to have a franchise here. And not only that, but it's what they did when they came in here, because of where our arena sat. We're in the middle of what's considered the arena district, which is arguably one of the premier entertainment areas within the city now. Mm-hmm. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, this was a wasteland where we are, parking lots. It's where the old state penitentiary used to be. I mentioned I worked at Nationwide. I started working there. The surface lot I parked in is probably around 100 feet from where I'm sitting right now. So this was nothing compared to what happened. And really, that investment had sparked so much change before the city. They really put it on a national, or continued trajectory on a national map, and just gave us another point of pride to really kind of promote. And that has gone on over the past 23 seasons for the team. Yes, we have not necessarily had the success on ice over those 23 years, or the sustained success that we would want, but there is a great level of pride that our fans take into it. We're sitting here right now, and unfortunately, we're not going to make the postseason. And in fact, we're pretty low in the records this year. But we're on path to go ahead, and we'll see how we do in these last 3 games. But the pathway is right there to be sold out the last 9 games of this season, and where we might be setting a record for overall attendance this year, the second highest in team history, and the most since the 2003 season. So I think it goes a credit to my colleagues, to our fan base, to the work that we do to make us relevant. We want the team to win, but make us relevant and exciting and something to do, even when the product on the ice isn't where everyone wants it to be.
Yeah, that's really remarkable. And so, whatever you're comfortable sharing or maybe not sharing, but when it comes to other organizations in the league, what are those type of conversations like when potentially you have a large market city that, despite their record as well, aren't selling out as well as you guys are? Is there that communication in terms?
Yeah, there really is. I mean, again, here's how I look at it is, there's 32 teams in the NHL. I think this is, I can't speak for other leagues, but I would hope this is the way that it is. But, you look at it, and we're speaking of the NHL. Yeah, you got your Torontos, your Rangers, your Bostons. They are in traditional major hockey markets that are things. Toronto could not do. I mean, they haven't won a cup since '68. They're still, sold out every single game. That place is crazy. It would be massive to have that kind of following. But, we can look to them and we can share concepts, but we're not really operating in the same realm in some ways of fan engagement. It's different there. We're in a non-traditional market. So when we start looking at it, we're talking to folks down in Tampa, Raleigh, Nashville, some of these places that have teams that are still in major cities and maybe even competing against other sports entities, whether it's other professional or major college teams, and seeing what they do. And we'll trade back and forth. And again, some of the things that we might do better, we work a lot on how we ticket and do a lot of multi-game plans. It's not just full seasons or nothing. We need to go ahead and we have to cater out a little bit. If you were in a major market that everyone loves it, maybe you're only selling full seasons or half seasons, but we can't be successful for that. So you kind of have to find those out, and you talk to them and say, what are you struggling with? Where are you at? What can you do here? So it's those like markets that are probably facing similar problems, and really developing good relationships with those folks so that we can kind of talk through. So even though we're all competing for the cup, you can probably break it down a little bit. I think the one thing that we're going through, and maybe more specifically, is what we've targeted with, is we're in a building that's about 20 years old. It was built purposely for our arena. Our arena was built for the team. And, it's in great shape, but it's also 20 years old. Sure. And we're not unlike some of our other colleagues that don't have newer buildings. And it's, how do you kind of look, and the fan experience, what the fans want is different now than it was 20 years ago. Sure. And so we'll have conversations on how we might be doing that. And that could be everything from concessions to checkout processes to what the fan engagement and what they're looking for, how they're looking to be entertained. What kind of seating are you guys changing around to? Is it club seating now? Is it more premium? What kind of lounge access? And you're trying to find out what's kind of resonating in some of these different markets and what you might be able to do in your own building.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that I initially was surprised with on the initial site tour, was being inside a 20-year-old facility that, it held the test of time pretty well. But to your point, it's still 20 years, right? But I think the architects, the builders, the ownership did a fantastic job of really future-proofing a particular venue, because from a maintenance, even upkeep, it seemed like a 10 to 15-year-old arena without question. And so I guess this is an awesome segue to kind of talk about, the stadium renovations that you've taken on this year. Obviously, this would not be an MVP interactive podcast without talking about fan experience and some level of technology. So the team embarked on a unique, first of a kind of experience for Nationwide Arena with the Fifth Line Fan Zone, which was obviously a concourse renovation that we had the pleasure of working with you on. And, let's talk maybe back from 2019, Ryan, from an organization standpoint, where did this all start, and where was the efforts, or at least the thought process, as to creating this unique fan experience or this concourse activation for your organization and your fans?
Well, it was in 2019, going almost into 2020 when we've had that conversation. And what was kind of challenged with us at that time, again, a very good building, but we were getting ready for our 20th anniversary, and there was talk and consideration about how we might be able to go ahead and up our game a little bit inside the arena to make sure that the experience for our fans was matching what their expectations were. And, there was a lot of walks through the concourse. We did some surveying, some asking of our fans and what they wanted in different areas. And, it came to see that, some of the what I would say the interactives, the sticks in hands, the photo opportunities, the user generated, we were probably kind of a little bit behind there. And, so the thought was, as internal was, could we go ahead and reimagine the fan game day experience, to go ahead and touch on a couple core items that kind of resonated through that? And if so, where would that live within the building? And because again, kind of with our building, we're not building an extension. It's kind of like Tetris. If we're going to move something here, we got to move something around. We started having some conversations, and as you know, we were looking at a space that was existing on our concourse that already had some really, I'm going to say analog. I don't know if that's the right term or not, but analog stick in hands kind of activations that were dated, I would say. And we had talked about that, and I think we had started some conversations, and even gotten some renderings and discussions. But then the pandemic hit, and everything really got pushed back. And it really wasn't a priority as much, even when we came back at that point, because we didn't know. But there was an opportunity as we came out of COVID, as the building itself was looking at everything, with one of the other parts was a change in the need for, the amount of shows that were starting to come into the building. Obviously, we're the core tenant for Nationwide, but the building brings in a lot of concerts as well. And there was a space that was identified that had been used at one point when the building first opened. This area wasn't even attached to the building. It was a restaurant. And then about 10 years in, it became integrated in, and it had been Frankenstein together. It had been a point of sale for our concessionaire, kind of a pub area. But it was where it was located was not in an advantageous position for concerts because it was kind of behind the house, so they couldn't use it as a point of sale. Whereas where our old fan zone that we had talked about was someplace that was front and center. So there was a discussion of what if we kind of switch these two around to allow for maybe a bigger footprint or a different footprint for the fan engagement area, where this other area could be utilized, as a point of sale for concessions. I think we brought you in, we started talking about it, and that's kind of where that initial for the space. But then we started talking about what we would want in there. And something that came through was, again, hockey in this market's a non-traditional market. We want to find ways to break down the barriers. We want to get sticks in kids' hands. We want to be relevant and using new technology. So the thoughts were, how might we be able to bring this in a kind of a user experience that might be a little bit more video game-esque? How can we go ahead and find some opportunities that might be, again, from a social media user-generated content that allow experiences to be promoted and live beyond the game day experience? And then, also just kind of have an opportunity for an area that could be utilized for additional content creation. And I'm thinking specifically, James, of the video game, our video game lounge, our gaming lounge, which we get into. But how can we bring those three components into one space? And I think that by partnering you and through a number of jigsaw puzzles and stuff like that, I think we came up with a pretty good solution.
I would say so, and it's really remarkable to see the breadth of awareness that it has kind of spanned the country across the league. Well, actually, the continent. Right? We were speaking to a couple of other NHL teams, and I think once the ribbon cutting or the soft launch happened for the Fifth Line fan zone, it really spread throughout the league as hopefully a North Star renovation for many clubs, because it certainly provided a one-of-a-kind, best-of-class experience for the fans. And from a facility standpoint, it's quite the draw, right? And I think when we talk about the project internally, there's a sense of pride and awareness that we have in terms of a lot of this technology, or a lot of the work that we do. The challenge for us is we're not a conventional company or a technology that is sort of off the shelf. And so everything has an element of a bespoke nature to it. And sure, there may be some elements that we can replicate, from past experiences and such, but, being able to have the opportunity to really sit with your team and brainstorm and ideate and really imagine, what this space would look like, and the original rendering to the final door opening. I mean, it was pretty spot on. And so that was a fascinating experience for us to You had mentioned, the locker room, replicating the player locker room and putting the esports zone into that area, or, developing a one of a kind using advanced sensor technology with a skill shot challenge and being able to shoot against a goalie, or target practice. And, the goalie game, talking about being able to participate as a fan, to be a goalie with live pucks coming out of you. This is equipment that you can't go to Home Depot and just pull off the shelf, right? So, one of the things where, the fact that we are forever gracious that we were able to work with you and you had the confidence in us to kind of build this stuff. But I think it just goes to show, not to sound too much like Walt Disney here, but you start with the imagination, right? And then it kind of goes from there. And so I think your organization and the way you guys handled everything and your team, what was special to me too is that everyone had a voice, on your side of the project, where maybe there was a passion point for one of your colleagues to implement one type of experience, and then another one with another experience. And so being able to really collaborate on that, issue those concepts to you and then iterate on those. I mean, it never gets old, right? It's such a unique experience. And for us, so as challenging as it is to overcome, the unknown unknowns when building these type of technologies, being able to get there eventually and continue to refine is really a special component to this as well.
But, and I agree with everything, James. And maybe 2 points of proof for me is after we launched, about a couple of weeks after we launched, a former colleague of ours who had been kind of involved with the project or knew what was from the project, but hadn't been back since we had launched, came in and was blown away with the space, because I think this comment was, it's almost exactly like what it looked like. It looks like what it's supposed to. Right. So again, he was kind of knew what was coming. And then when he saw it, I think he was really excited. And that, again, when you're going through these, you get so close to it and you might worry about little things here and there, but if you can take a step back and see that was great. And then, the other one too is and as you know, but we had a VIP event in this, probably began, about a month ago now, but where we had our players up there, and they were with some of our corporate partners and some of our VIPs, and the players themselves now, they're 19, 20, maybe up to the late 20s and stuff like that, but they loved it, and they were in there, and whether it was the shooting cage and trying to see if they could break the records or do a little bit better, or just, we have some gamers that were like blown away that the locker room or the gaming lounge looked like the locker room, and they were looking at their own stalls and stuff like that. It was neat for them to see it, because again, they had no concept of what was going on. They're focused on the ice, but when they step into an area and they can be kind of wowed, that always makes us feel good too. Yeah,
absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned that with the players too, because as grizzled old men as we are, you tend to forget how young these guys are, and so that's right in the wheelhouse of the demographic in terms of technology too, right? So that's a good point. You tend to forget sometimes. Being in the weeds.
I try not to think about it, actually. Don't look at their date of births,
That's right. Well, on that note, as we're approaching our time, Ryan, obviously something we say internally is, we're only as good as our last production. And no matter if that's in sports or business, with wins, losses, and such, what excites you? This was such a marquee experience for everyone involved. What excites you for the future, and what could CBJ fans look forward to maybe even next season?
Well, I think there's a couple of things to me. We're in an industry, or at least that is very cyclical. You go through it, the season starts, the season ends, you go in the off season, and I talked about it a little bit, and I think if you find yourselves confronting the same problems year in and year out, and you don't get excited for attacking those problems, maybe it changes in nature. And I still haven't found that yet with the Jackets, so I'm excited for that. It's been a difficult season for us on the ice and not where we want it to be, but not from lack of trying. So,
Sure.
I'm excited about next season already. We're already talking about that, and we're not that far off from our 25th anniversary. So when you start looking at that, I think, these pieces that we put in place, the fan zone. I think there's going to be probably some more engagement that we look for the fans going into the 25th, whether that's historical displays or opportunities to go ahead and continue to tell our story. Opportunity, again, we talked about, there's people that are first generation season ticket holders that are still, how do we tell their stories in maybe unique ways to continue to show how important our fandom is to our team, and they're part of our story. We're going to look at those opportunities, and we were hit by the injury bug. I'm very optimistic on the success next year, and that's one of the things is, if you know where you are when you're kind of not performing, where the sky is. Everyone loves a winner, and we look better, we seem smarter, we smell better. So that gets you excited to maybe take a couple weeks off, but then get ready for the upcoming season. And again, looking to see how we can continue to be best in the league from a fan engagement standpoint, whether that's an arena or a digital or wherever that might be.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very exciting, because if you guys are selling out crowds now with the record that you had, unfortunately, this year, and the sky is the limit, and you have a great facility, there's amazing touch points, and as mentioned, the organization really does care about the community and its fan base. And I think above anything, that's we sit on an interesting path, as where we are as a company in terms of how we try to, give value to our partners. And when you work with different organizations, you see how they treat certain opportunities or not, right? And so when you create these experiences, and you're fan focused and you're fan forward, it just shows from an ownership perspective, that there's awareness there that it takes a village to succeed, and so it's not just about the wins and losses. It's just the holistic experience of what it means to attend a CBJ game.
Well, and yeah, I mean, that truly is. And we are an organization, as you know, from working a little bit with us, and we don't necessarily have a very in-your-face ownership leadership team, but they're one that's very engaged. They want to know what's going on. They care very much. So they love. I mean, in fact, our president was just walking through the fan zone the other night, and he had a big smile on his face. He says it's looking great, working good, and that's always the attaboy you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ryan, I can't thank you enough for participating. I'm glad that even with all the communication and work that we've been involved in since last April, that we can still tolerate each other. So I appreciate that. But for our listeners, where can they find you, or what are you comfortable with sharing in terms of whether you want to talk about the efforts that you're doing, or maybe even some prospects that want to learn about?
You definitely can find me on LinkedIn for Ryan Chenault. Not too much on social media, but I will give my email, and anyone can reach out to me via email. And that's RCHEN as in Nancy, AULT @bluejackets.com.
Well, wonderful. Well, Ryan, again, thank you so much. And everyone, thanks for joining. And until next time.